All right, everybody, welcome to the May 5th Planning Commission meeting under quite different terms. I think most of us have been on a video conference before today, so there are some rules of the road today that we need to follow. Would everybody please mute themselves when they're not talking? And when you wish to talk, would you please identify yourself when you're speaking? I'd like to take the chair's prerogative today to thank Mike McGelkey for many years on the Planning Commission. He's decided to retire from this, so we'll be sure when you see Mike to thank him for all the years of service that he put in for us. Items number 12 and 15. Item 12, the conditional use permit for the telecommunications support structure located at 6120 53rd Avenue South will be heard in the June meeting. Also, item 15, the plat of Tice Addition located at 714 and 718 19th Avenue North will also be held at the June meeting. For these items, there will be no presentation by staff or the applicant, nor any action taken by the commission today. If anyone is anyone present who intended to testify on these items, either 12 or 15? All right. Moving on for approval of the order of agenda. If somebody would please make a motion to accept the order of agenda, please. Got to see if this works today. I will accept the motion for the order of agenda. I see Rocky's trying to talk.
Is it possible to unmute your computer and make the motion, please?
Rocky's trying to talk. He gave me a thumbs up.
I think we're muted on the master muted.
There we got you, Rocky.
All right, thank you. I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Looks like Melissa was trying to make it. I think we're muted on the master side.
How do you unmute?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Everyone in favor of the approval of the agenda, please say aye.
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 I'm going to take that as a motion carries. All right, moving on to the minutes of the regular meeting of March 3rd. We did not have a meeting in April, so our last meeting was March 3rd. Can I get a motion to accept the minutes from March 3rd?
Brad Bachmeyer, so moved.
I got a motion, and is there a second?
Scott Stafford seconds.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none. Everybody please, let me see, that's not a roll call vote. Everybody please say aye.
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 Any nays? Motion carries. Moving on to there will be no brown bag this month. We're going to try to figure out how to do this, and hopefully we can have one possibly in person this summer. Moving on to public hearing items. Item number 1 is Brandt Crossing 14th edition and Brandt Crossing 6th edition. Megan, please.
Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. Brandt Crossing 14th edition and Brandt Crossing 6th edition is a zoning change to repeal and reestablish a CO conditional overlay at the property at 3244 51st Street South. The property is known as Lot 1, Block 1, Brandt Crossing 14th, and the south 60 feet of Lot 2, Brandt Block 1, Brandt Crossing, 6th Edition. Applicant Chris Mack with Design Resources Group is available if you have any questions. In a little bit of background on this application, in February of this year, a boundary line adjustment with the subject property and the adjacent property just to the north was approved and recorded. The boundary line adjustment essentially moved the south 60 feet of the property on the north to the subject property. The two properties each had a different ordinance with conditional overlay, ordinances 4900 and 5066. The boundary line adjustment made it so that both ordinances were associated with the subject property. The requirements of the conditional overlays are exactly the same, and the applicant is proposing to repeal and reestablish the conditional overlay to retain one single conditional overlay, and there would be no changes to the conditional overlay that is in place on the property now. So essentially, it's a cleanup of the zoning, the conditional overlay. Staff has not received any inquiries on the application, and staff finds that all criteria are met and are recommending approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Board, any questions for Megan? Hearing none, invite the applicant to speak, if need be. All right. Go ahead.
No, I don't have anything to say unless you have questions.
Has anybody got any questions for the applicant? Hearing none, I'll open it for public comment. Anybody from the public wish to comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment. Is there any further discussion, or are we ready to act, commissioners?
This is Melissa Sobolik, and I will move to approve as presented.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
This is Rocky. I will second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, we will take a roll call vote. We'll see how this goes.
Mary Sherling,
Yes.
Miranda Tassa,
She's talking, but she was moving her lips.
Yes.
Okay, yes, okay.
Don Morgan,
Yes.
Brad Bachmeyer,
Yes.
Scott Stoffren,
Yes.
Art Rosenberg,
Yes.
Rocky Schneider,
Yes.
Melissa Sobolik,
Yes.
John Gunkelman.
Yes, motion carries. Moving on to item number 2, Northern Cheyenne Land, 3rd Edition. Donald Kress.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Donald Kress with the Department of Planning and Development. Item 2B is Northern Cheyenne Land Addition. This is located along 19th Avenue North, west of 45th Street. As you see, the property is zoned GI, General Industrial. This is a plat and zone change. There's the map there. Oops. In the black bordered area is the subject property. A little different here, as you may recall, in the last couple of years, 19th Avenue North has been rerouted. As you see, it goes to the north there. Photo is not quite up to date there. It's fully completed now, as you know, all the way through there. And there was some right-of-way left over when that was moved. Part of that right-of-way was incorporated into a plat a couple of years ago, the 19th Avenue Southwest Pond Addition, and there was a remaining piece of right-of-way which will be included in this project here, as you see along the black line there. Sorry. on here. And that's going to be incorporated into the lots there. The property owner owns all those lots, Northern Cheyenne Second Edition there, and is replatting them in a little different configuration and including the vacated right-of-way, or including the remaining right-of-way as part of a vacation for this plat. And just an idea what that looks like out there facing along 19th Avenue. We're standing at Sheyenne Loop North. In the top photo, we're looking east. The bottom photo, we're looking west. You can see there is a trail along there, and then the right-of-way where 19th Avenue used to go is on the inboard side of that. That is on the away from 19th Avenue from that. This is the plat that shows the project there, and also specifically states the vacation is a part of the plat process here. Second page for that one. And Commissioners, as you know, the vacation has an extra notification period, which will be taken care of prior to the City Commission meeting. Recommendation of staff is for approval as stated in your staff report and shown on the screen. And Mr. Brian Pattengale of Houston Engineering is the representative for this one. I believe Mr. Pattengale is with us if Commissioner has any questions. Thank you, Commissioners.
All right. Any questions for Donald, Commissioners? Any questions for Donald? Seeing none, or hearing none, or whatever, I invite the applicant to speak if needed.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. It's Brian Pattengale from Houston Engineering. Just really briefly, essentially Don did a real good job presentation. They're just taking the vacated right-of-way, kind of relaying out the layouts of the lots. And in addition to that, where obviously Donald mentioned we're changing the zoning from a general industrial to a limited industrial. The main reason behind that is as these lots are somewhat smaller, the general industrial zoning is kind of unlikely to be used in these lots. The light industrial allows a little bit more flexibility for some of the anticipated uses we're expecting to have on the land as it's developed. So that is the reasoning behind the request from the shift from general industrial to a light industrial zoning. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions for the applicant? All right, hearing none, I open it for public comment. Anybody from the public wish to comment on this? All right, hearing none, I close the public comment. Any additional discussion, Commissioners, or are we ready to act? Do I have a motion?
This is Dawn Morgan. I'd like to motion to accept the findings and to recommend approval to the city.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Brad Bachmeyer, second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a roll call vote.
Rocky Schneider,
Aye.
Mary Sherling,
Yes.
Melissa Sobolik,
Aye.
Scott Stoffren,
Aye.
Don Morgan,
Yes.
Brad Bachmeyer,
Aye.
Art Rosenberg,
Aye.
Miranda Tassa,
Aye.
John Gunkelman.
Can you hear me?
And I for John Gunkelman, too. Motion carries. Moving on to item number 3, Touchmark Addition, 1201 35th Avenue South and 1200 Harwood Drive South. Donald, please.
Commissioners, this is the Touchmark Addition. On this project, we're going to do something a little, or that we don't do very often. As you see in your staff report, the recommendation for this one was for approval, which was a pretty good recommendation at the time that we submitted this for your packet, but further discussion with the applicant and, potential design tune-ups and changes here, we're going to ask your commission to change that recommendation to a continuance to June for this project. We're going to just do a quick walkthrough of this so you know what's coming in June here. We're not going to dwell on too much here. But this property here, as you all may be familiar with, is located on South University Drive there between Harwood Drive and 35th Avenue South. Most of it, as you see in this photo, is the orange is zoned MR3. It's going to remain that. That little gray area is zoned Ag. That's a small property that the applicant has bought a single-family residence on. It's going to be demolished as part of the expansion of this project. This project will provide both memory care and independent living and assisted living. So there's three levels of care that are going to be available here. They're going to be adding a new building in the southwest portion of the property. I'm going to go to this. This is the aerial photo with the black outline in the southwest corner. You can see how that's going to get laid out. And again, that one house with the red roof there is the additional property that's going to get demolished and built as that house. This is what that house looks like right now. And then as you see, there's going to be some undeveloped part of the property there, which is going to be filled in by the new building. There's the plat generally. And site plan again here showing some landscaping and some parking. And this is the part that the final design is going to be improved upon here. This is the chart that's in your staff report. Again, this requires, since this is a PUD, it requires a zone change. We're keeping the basic zoning that's on the large part of it there, but also we have to rezone that Ag piece to MR3. And these are the parameters for the PUD. As you're all probably familiar with this chart, we show the current development standards, the proposed changes, and any notes on them here. But again, with some design tune-ups of the building, we figured it'd be easier just to continue it, get it right at that time, rather than have to come back. So our revised recommendation is to continue the zone change, PUD master land use plan and plat to the June 2nd Planning Commission. And Mr. Pattengale and I have discussed this. Again, Mr. Pattengale from Houston Engineering is the project representative, and he may have some additional comments on this. Just an interesting history, as you saw in there, that this had what we call an old style PUD from when, before the current land development code, that is part of the reason they have to do a new one because we don't use that style anymore. So we want it in the current style. So generally still favorable, but we just want to have a final hearing on it in June. Thank you, Commissioners. That concludes staff's presentation.
Do we need, how do we want to move forward with it? Do we need a motion to continue it eventually?
Yes, sir, I believe you would. It'd be a recommendation.
Okay.
And I don't know if Mr. Pattengale had any more comments too.
Invite the applicant to speak. Brian,
afternoon, Commissioner. Afternoon, Commissioners again. Just briefly, like I said, we've over the last several days and last week, we've had a discussion with Donald and the staff. They've raised some sort of got some concerns, but so much some clarification items. We wanted to just kind of work through those as we've kind of discovered that maybe we don't have the best answer. So since to avoid coming back for multiple stabs at this, we just want to have a little more time to kind of work out the specifics with the city staff as they move forward on this. Overall design intent's probably going to stay roughly the same as far as the building footprint and kind of the site layout you see there. Just working out some of the specifics of the PUD to make sure that we get it right the first time.
Great. Any questions for Brian? And also, Don Morgan, would you make sure to mute your microphone when you're not speaking, if you haven't already?
I will.
Thank you. Any questions for Brian? Anyone? Commissioners? Hearing none, I'll open up for public comment. Anybody from the public wish to comment on this project? All right, I'll close the public comment, and I guess I'm looking for a motion from the commissioners to continue this to the next meeting.
John, this is Scott. I so move.
I have a motion.
This is Rocky, second.
And we have a second.
Sorry.
Do we need a roll call vote for this one?
Yes, sir.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
Rocky Schneider,
Yes.
Melissa Sobolik,
Aye.
Brad Bachmeyer,
Aye.
Mary Sherling,
Yes.
Scott Stoffren,
Yes.
Art Rosenberg,
Aye.
Miranda Tassa,
Aye.
Don Morgan,
Yes.
John Gunkelman.
Aye, motion carries. It will be continued to next meeting. All right, moving on to item number 4, Osgood Townsite 11th and 12th edition. Kylie.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Item 4A and 4B is titled Osgood Townsite 11th and 12th edition. The applicant, Brian Pattengale, is requesting a zone change from GC General Commercial with a conditional overlay to MR3 Multi-Dwelling Residential and a growth plan amendment from commercial to medium-high density residential. The zone change will remove the conditional overlay in its entirety on the subject property, which is located at 4800 and 4850 46th Street South. The applicant is proposing to build a multi-dwelling structure which is consistent with the surrounding area. The proposed growth plan amendment to medium-high density residential is suitable for multi-dwelling structures. Staff and the applicant held a neighborhood growth plan meeting and did not have any inquiries regarding the application at that meeting. Previous to that meeting, staff did receive some general inquiries from surrounding property owners who had no concerns about this application. They were just more curious as to what was happening with the property. Based on the zone change and growth plan amendment criteria of the LDC, staff is recommending approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Any question, Commissioners, for Kylie? Seeing none, or hearing none? I invite the applicant to speak.
Good afternoon again, Commissioners. The owner on this property is looking to develop, like I said, as Kylie stated, a large multifamily apartment complex. The zoning is a cleanup from a straight commercial zoning, obviously, to just a standard MR3 zoning. The conditional overlay is a partial overhang from the properties to the east.
All right, hearing none, I open it for public comment. Anybody from the public wish to comment on this application? Hearing none, I close the public comment. Any other discussion, Commissioners, or are we ready to act? I'll entertain a motion.
This is Melissa Sobolik, and I move to approve as presented.
I have a motion. I need a second.
I'll second. This is second, Miranda Tassa.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Mary Sherling,
Yes.
Melissa Sobolik,
Aye.
Scott Stoffren,
Aye.
Art Rosenberg,
Aye.
Miranda Tassa,
Aye.
Don Morgan,
Aye.
Brad Bachmeyer,
Aye.
Rocky Schneider,
Aye.
John Gunkelman.
Aye, motion carries. Moving on to item number 5. Egbert, O'Neill, and Haggarts Addition. Kylie Bagney, please.
Item number 5A and 5B is titled Egbert, O'Neill, and Haggarts Addition and is located at 421 and 425 24th Street South and 424 25th Street South. The applicants, Mike and Kelly Hoffman, are requesting a zone change from SR4 single dwelling residential and GC general commercial with a conditional use to GC general commercial with a conditional use permit to allow household living. The two properties in question are zoned GC on the west half of the parcel and SR4 on the east half of the parcel. When the properties were originally zoned, there were commercial businesses on the west half along 25th Street South and single-family homes on the east half along 24th Street South. Today, the property located at 424 25th Street South and 425 24th Street South has a commercial business with a residential unit, which will still require a building permit to come into compliance, and a single-family residential structure. As you can see on the screen, there's an image of the existing single-family home and then the commercial business along 25th Street South. The property located at 421 24th Street South has a commercial parking lot on it. It is the applicant's intent to demolish the single-family home and use the residential unit within the commercial building, which will need to meet all applicable fire and building codes prior to the applicant being able to use the residential structure. Staff has not received any inquiries regarding this application. Based on the zone change and conditional use permit criteria of the LDC, staff is recommending approval with the conditions that are shown on the screen. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Commissioners, do we have any questions for Kylie? Hearing none, I invite the applicant to speak. If present, anyone present?
Hi there, this is Todd Jelinski. I really have nothing much more to add than what Kylie already presented. Again, we're just looking to get the properties into compliance with zoning and set us up to move forward with our upgrade for the residents on the second floor of the business.
Great. Any questions, commissioners? Hearing none, I will open it up to the public for comment. Anyone from the comment, or anybody from the public wish to comment?
Commissioners, this is Ryan Erickson with the fire department.
Yeah.
I did just want to provide quick background on this and a comment that this did kind of spin out of our office when we were made aware of the residential use occurring within the commercial building. And so one of the steps that does need to occur is for them to get the zoning in place in order to get a building permit to allow that, because the current use today isn't safe and separated the way it should be, so that we need, in order for that to occur, we need the building permit to be issued and construction to occur in order for that to be safe and legal.
Thank you. Any questions for Ryan, commissioners?
This is Don Morgan.
Yes, Don.
Can you hear? Oh, okay. Yeah, it's not really a question. I did drive over there today, and I did notice that the east or the west side of 24th Street has mostly been converted into commercial. And even though there may have been residences there at one time, there are hardly any left. So I would be in favor of approval. The other comment I'd like to make as the president of the Jefferson Neighborhood Association is that we're always concerned about commercial encroachment into the neighborhoods. But as long as there's a continued commitment to maintaining the commercial on the west side and allowing the eastern side of 24th to remain residential, it sounds good to me. What are you laughing about, Eric? Okay.
All right. Any other comments, commissioners? Anyone else from the public wish to comment? All right, I'll close the public comment period. Any additional discussion, commissioners? Or are we ready to act? Do I have a motion?
This is Miranda Tassel. Make the recommended motion as findings and recommended by staff.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'd like to second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Brad Bachmeyer,
Aye.
Mary Sherling,
Yes.
Don Morgan,
Aye.
Art Rosenberg,
Aye.
Rocky Schneider,
Aye.
Melissa Sobolik,
Aye.
Scott Stoffren,
Aye.
Miranda Tassa. Aye. John Gunkelman.
Aye, motion carries. Moving on to item number 6, RTFMA Addition. Maggie.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Item number 6A and 6B on your agenda are titled RTFMA Addition. The subject property is located at 1326 16.5 Street South. The owner of the property is rebuilding Together Fargo-Moorhead area. The applicant is seeking approval of 2 entitlements. First is a zoning map amendment, and second is a minor subdivision entitled RTFMA Addition. The zoning map amendment would rezone the lot from SR3 single dwelling residential to SR5 single dwelling residential to increase the maximum density allowed per acre. And the proposed minor subdivision would replat the subject property into 2 lots. The property owner is interested in constructing a twin home on the subject property, and for that twin home to be compliant with the Land Development Code, the minimum lot width must decrease from the existing 50-foot requirement in the SR3 zoning district. At this time, SR5 is the proper zoning district to accommodate single dwelling residential developments on 25-foot lots. The smallest lot in the proposed subdivision is currently 3,746 square feet, which meets the minimum requirements of the SR5. Staff did receive 1 letter of opposition in response to this request for a zone change. The author of the letter states concerns about the unfair approval practices conducted by the city. A copy of that letter is attached in your packet. It is also worth noting that variances are reviewed by the Board of Adjustment and not the Planning Commission. With that in mind, staff finds that all criteria have been met and are recommending approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions, as well as I believe Nathan Anderson is available to answer any questions as well.
Any questions, Commissioners, for Maggie? Hearing none. I invite the applicant to speak. Nathan?
Okay, this is Nate Anderson with Nile Incorporated, representing the RTFMA Addition, being proposed just to accommodate the project for rebuilding Together, and I really don't have anything to add to what Maggie has stated. Here for any questions that you might have.
Any questions for Nate? Hearing none, open it up to the public for comment. Would you use that podium, please? Thank you. And please introduce yourself. Thanks.
Good afternoon. My name is Rebecca Anderson. My property is at 1317 16.5 Street South. That property is located 3 doors north and across the street from this plot of land. First of all, my entire block would like to thank you for tearing down the horribly dilapidated house that was there. If you had built absolutely nothing on that, we would still be happy just to have that as a green space. This part of town is an older part of town, and we have a lot of small homes there. There is another property on our block 3 doors south of that, and if you should in the future be interested in that property, we would be very grateful to have that property torn down as well and something nice put on it. My biggest concern is that we have not really heard what this building is going to be used for other than from one person. Steve Tollefson owns the home 2 doors south of that. He is a veteran, a disabled veteran. My husband also is a 20-year Army veteran and is disabled also. Most of the properties on that block have single driveways on them. We don't have the luxury of having double driveways, and parking becomes a huge issue there, especially in the winter. My side of the street on the west side is a no parking area, so everyone is pushed to the east side of the street. And as you know, there are 2 duplexes north of that property, and the curbing in the front of those is very, very narrow, and there is no room for parking. We were wondering, is this building going to indeed be used to house disabled veterans? Is there going to be staff there at all times? And how many vehicles can we expect to add to our block that possibly will increase the parking problem that we already have? I'm quite sure that I know the person that has sent the probably nasty letter to you. He is nasty to everyone on the block. He is a constant problem to everyone and calls the police all the time. And if I were the commission, I would disregard anything he has to say. I just would like to know what the parking is going to be like on that property, and if it will indeed raise our property values or diminish our property values.
Okay, let's see if we can get Nathan to answer some of those questions.
Absolutely. As far as I can't address the question as to whether or not there's going to be a disabled veteran or anybody like that, inhabiting these units, but I can address the parking side of things. We're going to adhere to the setbacks and in the neighborhood, taking into account the adjacent properties and using the setback as set forth by the city, and definitely maintain parking stalls in the driveways of each individual property for the inhabitants of the house that will be off the street. So there shouldn't be any additional weight put on the street parking in that area, other than any guests that may happen by to these residences.
Is there any way if we can find out if that is indeed going to be used as a group home? We have no problem with that. We welcome that if that's what it's going to be. If it's just going to be a regular duplex, that's fine too. But we were just wondering if that was going to be a group home. The duplex north of there was used for just a few months as a group home for some mentally disabled people, and we have every reason to believe that the garage on the north side of the duplex was blocked off and that there were people actually using the garage as a bedroom, which I find concerning when it's 50 below in the winter. But that garage door was never opened the entire time of the winter, and garbage cans were put in front of it and the lights were always on. So we're just kind of wanting to make sure that we don't have that kind of an issue here too.
Yeah, I don't know the specifics of the inhabitants, but I'm fairly certain that it's not a group home. I believe that these residences are going to be sold to people that are in the lower income side of things. It falls into place with the lower income housing, making it affordable, this project for those type of individuals.
Okay, thank you. And thank you again for tearing down the property that was there. We appreciate it.
Thank you for your comments.
Yeah.
Anybody else from the public wish to address this item? Hearing none, I will close the public comment. Any additional discussion, or are we ready to act, commissioners?
Mr. Chair, this is Scott. I move to approve with the motion in the staff report.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Brad Bachmeyer, second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
If you were going to have a group home, wouldn't the zoning have to be changed there if that were the case?
That was Mary, right?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, Mary Sherling.
I would pose that to the planning department.
Hi, Mary. So it's our understanding that the property is going to be used for twin homes, so just 2 dwelling units on the newly platted property.
Correct, but if you were going to turn it into group home living, wouldn't you need it?
Yeah, Commissioner Gulkelman and Commissioner Sherling, yes, that would require a conditional use permit, I believe. It's not allowed by right.
So then that should satisfy the neighbor's concern.
Correct.
Correct? Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Art Rosenberg.
Aye.
Melissa Sobolik.
Aye.
Mary Sherling.
Yes.
Don Morgan.
Yes.
Rocky Schneider.
Aye.
Scott Stoffren.
Yes.
Miranda Tassa.
Aye.
Brad Bachmeyer.
Aye.
John Gunkelman.
Aye, motion carries. All right, moving on to item number 7, Epic Gateway Addition. Maggie.
Thank you, Commissioner. Item number 7 on your agenda is titled Epic Gateway Addition. The subject property is located at 300 Main Avenue and 44 4th Street South. It is in the downtown area. The owner of the property is Epic Gateway LLC. The applicant is requesting a minor subdivision plat entitled Epic Gateway Addition, which would replat Lot 1, Block 4 of North Dakota R2 Urban Renewal Edition into 3 new lots. Proposed Lot 1 will have access off of Main Avenue, while proposed Lots 2 and 3 will have access off 4th Street South. The property is currently zoned downtown mixed use, and no change in the zoning is being requested. Notices of the proposed plat have been sent out to property owners within 300 feet of the subject property, and to date, staff has received no inquiries about the application. Staff finds that all criteria have been met and are recommending approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Maggie?
Yes, this is Dawn Morgan. I'm kind of misunderstanding this project. So the area that this is covering, is it what is currently the parking lot in front of that strip mall? Gateway?
So the area that it's covering is an existing building and the parking lot.
But which existing building?
John, just to clarify.
This is Brian from Epic Company.
Yeah, it covers the whole thing. Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Okay, so
Yes, it's the newest building that we'll be building there will be right up against Main Avenue. So it'll be a 5-story mixed-use building in similar style that we've built in downtown West Fargo and over in Moorhead. If that helps you understand.
So, this is Dawn Morgan. Where is the parking for that building? Is there underground parking?
There is underground parking, yes. Then there will be parking between, see the parking lot there? This building will be right up against Main Avenue, just like a typical downtown type building.
Sure.
And then in the center area where you see those cars, most of that parking will remain.
So what is the definition of the 3 lots? What are they going to contain?
Yep, that's lot 1. And then lot 2 is just to the south of it there, the large lot. and then lot 3 is just to the west, which is just an existing building that's already there, where that surgery center is.
Is that going to remain, or does that turn into a driveway?
The surgery center still remains. The driveway is right there in the corner of that picture where it says entrance.
So the driveway will be in front of to the south of the surgery center.
That drive will remain, yes.
Sorry, the one that connects to 4th Street, correct?
Connects to 4th Street there, yes, and then also to Main Avenue for lot 1. And we'll also have cross parking easements and cross access easements.
Are you constructing only one building?
Commissioner Gunkelman?
At this particular time, yes.
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan, this is just a plat, and so I defer this back to the topic at hand, if you don't mind.
Okay, let's move on. I guess I should open it up. Well, the applicant has been speaking, and it's just a plat, and it will come back to us again.
No, it's allowed by right. So this is zone DMU and downtown mixed-use zoning. And so this is, I don't know, Maggie, I'll turn it back to you if you want to talk more about the plat. But I think to allow the applicant to present still needs to happen, and then to open it up for questions.
Okay. I invite the applicant to speak at this time.
I'm here for any questions you have, and I also on the phone have Tony Sager from MBN if there get to be any technical questions on that aspect.
But yeah, we don't have a site plan for this, just to clarify. There's no site plan involved. Just a plat.
Just the plot. All right. Any other questions for the applicant?
This is Scott Stoffern, and I know we've had a discussion before, presentations about the property there and the property to the east, people having, some visions how that whole area would be redeveloped. Is this, can we anticipate that will be part and parcel of the vision for that property to the east at some point?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, great questions raised. I see this as 3 separate projects. From a city perspective, the project and the platting you're going to debate today, and the project that Epic is planning, by the way, did receive a Renaissance Zone designation last week, I believe it was. So they're moving forward with their parcel of land that they own, as I understand it. The high-rise, which is Fargo Housing Authority, is a separate project that will occur over a couple of years, most likely, with removing or relocating the residents to a different alternative housing, and then likely raising or imploding, or however you want to define, taking it down, and then redevelopment and an RFP led by the Fargo Housing Authority and the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development on an RFP for phase 2, call it. Phase 3 is the land owned by the city, as you might recall, and I can only speak as one commissioner. We haven't defined what it is we want to see occur there on the east, but likely a complement to that, whether that's a sale of the land or whether that's land that we lease to a developer for a long-term complex. So great question, Scott. It's a step process. The housing authority in itself is going to take some time, and what we decide at the city is really, I think, kind of been put on the back burner for a while because of COVID, but that, I hope, gives you a better sense of what our say is with the normal processes today, and ownership of the land, and then the housing authority's decisions when they want to award a contract and to who.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any further questions for Brian?
This is Dawn Morgan. Could I ask Tony a question?
Sure.
Sure, Don.
Okay, so in this longer view for the high rise and redeveloping that entire area there, I've heard, of course, you don't always know what you hear, whether it's true or not, but I had heard that that shopping center is going away at some point. Is that true?
I think that's all part of a planned process, whether that's decisions made by the developer, in this case Epic, and how that complements with an overall approach to the housing. I think those things yet are to be determined, but I think at the end of the day, imagine 5 years from now looking at that parcel of property as a redevelopment and new development, what it's going to mean for downtown as well as residents and commercial enterprise. So I think it's a longer term view that I would answer that with, not knowing what the decisions are with the leadership of Epic, but I think at the end of the day, it's going to complement and provide options down the road. That's the best I could say with my barometer.
Thank you. That sounds all really good.
All right. Any other questions for Brian? All right, I'll open it up to the public for comment. Any public comment on this item? Hearing none, I'll close the public comment. Any additional discussion, commissioners? Are we ready to act? I have a motion.
This is Dawn Morgan. I'd like to make a motion to accept the findings and recommendations of staff and hereby recommend approval to the City Commission.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second, Art Rosenberg.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Miranda Tassa,
Aye.
Melissa Sobolik,
Aye.
Art Rosenberg,
Aye.
Don Morgan,
Aye.
Scott Soffren,
Aye.
Rocky Schneider,
Aye.
Mary Sherling,
Yes.
John Gunkelman.
Aye, motion carries. Moving on to item number 8, Aldi First Edition, 4303 and 4305 13th Avenue South. Donald, please.
Right with you, sir. Thank you, Commissioner Gunkelman. Item 8 is Aldi First Edition. This is located on 13th Avenue South, zone general commercial. Simple plat here to divide this property into 2 pieces. There's no zoning change proposed. It stays general commercial, which is the appropriate zoning for these buildings. You're probably familiar with this property that's been many things over the years. Currently it is the Burlington Coat Factory and the Aldi grocery store, which recently opened. This photograph is slightly out of date here. The Aldi would be on the east side of this property. As you're facing from the street, they're facing 13th Avenue is in the top photo. You see the Burlington Coat Factory and Aldi, and then the lower photo in the lower right there is we're on the east side of the Aldi property, and that's the driveway that goes there, the sort of the fire lane easement that goes all the way across, all the way and connects with the next street over there. So that remains there. That's on the plat. Again, the purpose of the plat here is just to divide the property so that each building is on its own lot. Lot 1 would be the Burlington Coat Factory building. Lot 2 would be the Aldi building. Those are illustrative, that the buildings outlines don't appear on the final plat. That's just illustrative for this purpose here. And so again, no zoning change. We did have a few phone inquiries as we notify property owners within 300 feet of the surrounding property. We did get a couple inquiries, but they were just wondering what was going on. Some of them had never received a letter before. One had never received a letter, so it was thought he had to do something. Just explained the situation, sent a copy of the plat to them, so they had no objection to it. So again, staff's recommendation is for approval, as stated in your staff report and shown on the screen. And again, Mr. Nathan Anderson of Nile is, I believe, still with us. He is the project representative, and he may have additional comments. Thank you, Commissioners.
Any questions for Donald, Commissioners? See none, I'll invite the applicant to speak.
Okay, again, Nate Anderson with Nile Incorporated. I don't really, again, have anything to add, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Any questions for Nate? All right, hearing none, I'll open the public comment. Anyone from the public wish to speak for or against this? Hearing none, I close the public comment. Any additional discussion, Commissioners, or are you ready to act? Do I have a motion?
This is Melissa Sobolik, and I'll move to approve as presented.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Dawn Morgan, I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Melissa Sobolik,
Aye.
Scott Stoffren,
Aye.
Miranda Tassa,
Aye.
Rocky Schneider,
Aye.
Art Rosenberg,
Aye.
Don Morgan,
Aye.
Mary Sherling,
Yes.
Brad Bachmeyer,
Aye.
John Gunkelman.
Aye, motion carries. Moving on to item number 9, Urban Plains by Brandt, 5th edition, 2867 55th Street South. Kylie, please.
Item 9A and 9B is titled Urban Plains by Brandt, 5th edition. The applicant, Brian Pattengale, is requesting a minor subdivision and a conditional use permit for the subject property located at 2867 55th Street South. The minor subdivision will replat Lot 1, Block 2, Urban Plains by Brandt, 3rd edition, into 5 lots, 1 block. The intent is to continue the Uptown and Main mixed-use development to the north of the subject property. The minor subdivision will also include a 30-foot private street, which will be a continuation of the private street to the north. The applicant is also requesting a conditional use permit to allow household living in the LC Limited Commercial Zoning District. The applicant is proposing apartment buildings with walk-up ground floor units along 55th Street South. Staff has not received any inquiries regarding this application. Based on the subdivision and conditional use permit criteria of the LDC, staff is recommending approval with the conditions that were provided in your packet. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Any questions for Kylie? And also, Dawn, would you remember to mute yourself when you're not speaking? Thank you. We get a little feedback. Any questions for Kylie? See no questions for Kylie. I invite the applicant to speak.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is Brian Pattengale. Again, as Kylie explained, this is a continuation of the Uptown and Main development to the north of currently exists. The intent at this point is we're currently working with the applicant to develop a mixed-use apartment complex on the corner of 55th there, and we do have one commercial property in the development along Veterans as well. The intent is, as we don't have a mixed-use zoning, is to allow sort of this mixed residential / commercial parcels to be developed in this LC limited commercial, very similar to the building on the corner of 55th to the north, that existing mixed-use building. This one will have slightly less retail commercial space than that, but it'll be a similar style / development.
Any other questions for Brian? All right, I'll open it up to the public for comment. Anybody from the public wish to speak for or against this project? Hearing none, I close the public comment. Any additional discussion or questions, commissioners? Are we ready to act? Do I have a motion?
Commissioner Sherling, I move to approve.
I have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
This is Scott. I move to second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Don Morgan,
Aye.
Mary Sherling,
Yes.
Scott Stoffren,
Yes.
Melissa Sobolik,
Aye.
Miranda Tassa,
Aye.
Brad Bachmeyer,
Aye.
Rocky Schneider,
Aye.
Art Rosenberg,
Aye.
John Gunkelman.
Aye, motion carries. I think I'm gonna have to learn sign language because I see you almost starting to speak before I hear anything here. All right, moving on to item number 10. Asselson Industrial Park, 3rd edition, 3345, 3357, and 3369 39th Street South and 4013 34th Avenue South. Kylie.
Item 10 is titled Asselson Industrial Park 3rd Edition. The applicant, Dave Jones, is requesting a zone change from GC General Commercial to LI Limited Industrial on the properties located at 3345, 3357, and 3369 39th Street South and 4013 34th Avenue South. The applicant is proposing to construct an office building and a warehouse for his construction company on the vacant parcel. The warehouse will store equipment, which is permitted by right in the LI zoning district. The existing buildings located at 3345, 3357, and 3369 39th Street South will also be permitted by right in the LI zoning district. Staff has not received any inquiries regarding this application. Based on the zone change criteria of the LDC, staff is recommending approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Any questions for Kylie? Hearing none, I invite the applicant to speak. Not sure.
Yes, this is Dave Jones. I really don't have anything more to add to what Kylie stated.
All right, any questions for the applicant? All right, hearing none, I open it for public comment. Anybody from the public wish to comment either for or against this project? Hearing none, I close the public comment period. Any further discussion, commissioners, or are we ready to act?
This is Miranda Tassa. I move to approve.
I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
This is Rocky. I'll second.
We got a double there. Rocky and Miranda. Who wants it?
Are you offering it up for bids?
Oh, I'll give it to Miranda. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Roll call vote, please.
Melissa Sobolek,
Aye.
Mary Sherling,
Yes.
Art Rosenberg,
Aye.
Brad Bachmeyer,
Aye.
Scott Stoffren,
Aye.
Rocky Schneider,
Aye.
Miranda Tassa,
Aye.
Don Morgan, she said, okay. John Gunkelman.
Aye. Motion carries. All right. Moving on to item number 11. Calico Prairie Addition, 4462 30th Avenue South. Maggie.
Thank you, Commissioner. Item number 11 on your agenda is titled Calico Prairie Addition. The subject property is located at 4462 30th Avenue South. The owner is the Housing Authority of the City of Fargo. The applicant is seeking a conditional use permit for an alternative access plan in order to reduce the number of parking stalls required on site. The Housing Authority of the City of Fargo intends to construct a senior assisted living facility. The facility will be 4 stories tall and will consist of 84 residential units, central common spaces, and support spaces with various amenities. Based on the requirements of the LDC, 189 parking stalls would typically be required for this type of development. Alternatively, the applicant is proposing that 73 parking stalls will be adequate on-site parking for the subject property. The engineering department determined that the 73 off-street parking spots would meet the facility's needs based on the information provided by the applicant, including supporting information from the Parking Generation Manual by the Institute of Transportation Engineers. Notices of the proposed use were sent out to property owners within 300 feet of the subject property, and to date, staff has received 2 inquiries about the project, but no letters of opposition. Staff finds that all criteria have been met and are recommending approval with the conditions noted on the screen. And I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time, as well as Ryan Gran is also available.
Any questions for Maggie, commissioners?
Yes, this is Scott. Could you explain how you come to arrive at the allowable parking on that site?
Yes, so in the narrative provided by the applicant, they did quote the Seniors Housing Council of the National Association of Home Builders, which states that it's a recommended average of 0.5 parking spaces required per unit of residential living. So since they are proposing 84 residential units, they provided 0.5 spaces per unit to get 42 stalls for the occupants, with an additional 31 stalls for visitor parking and administration use.
Scott, this is one of the things that we're looking at also in the LDC as we review the LDC, that right now the LDC does not differentiate on a lot of the different types of building uses. So this is something that we look to address as we review changes to the LDC code. Any other questions for Maggie?
I have a question. Kind of going off Scott's question, how many bedrooms are in each unit? I mean, that should certainly make a difference on parking stalls.
I would actually defer to Ryan Gran for that question.
All right.
Basically, there are a total of 84 units, 76 one-bedroom units, and 8 two-bedroom units.
And that's where you get your total of 84. Okay.
Correct.
This is Dawn Morgan speaking.
Go ahead, Don.
I'm wondering if it's anticipated that because of the nature of the building residents, that there'll be fewer cars brought to the building by the residents.
Well,
that's typically one of the things here, I guess, that maybe you can comment on here based on the reduced parking here and then the national transportation, here of seniors and everything, of how we look at reducing parking. We've used this, I guess, for Bethany, and for some of the assisted living facilities here in town. Here, based on that once you get to this stage here, from independent to assisted, cars are on the decline, I guess, right there.
Thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome.
As long as we've moved it into Ryan to speak, any other questions for Ryan, the applicant? Hearing no further questions for Ryan, I open it up for public comment. Anybody from the public wish to speak for or against this project? Hearing none, I close the public comment. Any additional discussion, commissioners? Are we ready to act? I'll entertain a motion.
Dawn Morgan, I'd like to make a motion to accept the findings and recommendations of staff and thereby move to approve the conditional use permit.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
This is Scott.
Brad.
I'll second.
Claire, second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Rocky Schneider,
Wake up,
Aye.
Rocky. Oh.
Mary Sherling,
Yes.
Miranda Tassa,
Aye.
Scott Stoffren,
Aye.
Don Morgan,
Aye.
Brad Bachmeyer,
Aye.
Art Rosenberg,
Are you there, Art?
Melissa Sobolek,
Aye.
John Gunkelman.
Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to item number 13, Corwin, second edition.
Chair Gunkelman,
Yes.
we've been going for about an hour. Do we want to take a quick break and then reconvene here in about 5 minutes?
Why don't we'll take a 5-minute break. At 4:21. All right, moving on to item number 13, Corwin Second Edition, 222 40th Street South and 301 38th Street South. Aaron.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Item 13, Corwin Second Edition. This is a request for a minor subdivision to replat two existing lots. Essentially, the purpose of this subdivision is to adjust the interior lot line between those two lots. The subject property currently contains two car sales lots, and on the south end of this subject property, there's an existing car wash building, and essentially this plat will replat the car wash building from Lot 1 to Lot 2. So on the image here on your screen, you can see what that car wash building looks like, looking northwest from 4th Avenue South. So really it's just a minor adjustment of that interior lot line. Staff has reviewed the subdivision application, finds it compliant with all requirements of the Land Development Code, and we are recommending approval. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have for staff.
Any questions for Aaron? Hearing no questions for Aaron. Any questions for the applicant? Brian, you've been on almost everything here tonight.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Just a quick explanation on why we're doing this. The owner has plans to expand their existing service bays on the Jeep Dodge Chrysler, or the Jeep and Dodge dealership to the southeast of the portion of the site. And to comply with the current land development code, we have to adjust the location of some of the property lines to make sure we have the proper setbacks between the two parcels. So this plat is that sort of first step in doing that as they look at expanding their existing facilities.
All right, any questions for Brian? Hearing no questions from Brian, I will open it up to the public for comment. Anybody from the public wish to comment for or against this project? Hearing none, I close the public comment period. Any additional discussion, Commissioners, or are we ready to act? Hearing none, I'll accept them. Is there a motion out there?
This is Melissa, and I will move to approve as presented.
I have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Brad Bachmeyer, second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote.
Mary Sherling,
Yes.
Rocky Schneider,
Aye.
Scott Stoffren,
Yes.
Miranda Tassa,
Aye.
Brad Bachmeyer,
Aye.
Don Morgan,
Aye.
Melissa Sobolik,
Aye.
John Gunkelman.
Aye, motion carries. Moving on to item number 14, text amendment. Aaron.
Thank you. So item number 14 is a proposed text amendment to the Land Development Code. So this is a proposed amendment to amend section 20-0402 and section 20-0403 of the LDC relating to the prohibition of firearms and ammunition sales as a non-farm commercial use or as a home occupation. Before I get into this, I just want to note there is, I've got quite a few slides here, quite a bit of text. There's no images or anything, so I thought I'd spice up the background with some color for you guys. And then I did want to go over a couple of quick bullet points too. Again, there is a lot of information, and so I'll try and kind of go through everything kind of step by step, and I'd be happy to circle back to anything in more detail. So first off, the City Commission directed staff to review the origins of the existing ordinance and to initiate an LDC text amendment for consideration by the Planning Commission and the City Commission. And that's specifically relating to the prohibition of firearms and ammunition sales as a home occupation or as a non-farm commercial use. In addition to that, the city received an application from an individual citizen for a proposed LDC text amendment. And so the application is really in front of you for two different reasons. You can think of this application as having kind of co-applicants, one being the City of Fargo as directed by the City Commission, and two, the other applicant being an individual citizen submitting an LDC text amendment application. And so the proposed amendment would essentially remove the current prohibition of firearm and ammunition sales that are conducted as either a non-farm commercial use or as a home occupation. That's the extent of the ordinance. On the next slide here, I'll show you what that looks like. And then I'll talk about the two ordinances here in more detail in a second. So this slide here, I realize the text is super small. It's not intended to be read. It's just intended to give you an idea of the scope of the amendment. And so you'll see there are two different sections within the Land Development Code that explicitly prohibit firearms and ammunition sales, again, as part of a home occupation or as part of a non-farm commercial use. And then the proposed text amendment here is just to simply strike out references to the firearms and ammunition sales. Next slide, please. And so I'm going to start out with a little bit of background information on just to provide some context, and then I'll kind of get into some of the details of the home occupation, the way that it works, some of the findings that staff has, and things like that. So just to start with, a federal firearms license is required by the federal government for anybody to take part in any sales of firearms or ammunition. FFLs is what federal firearm license, the initials for that, so that's what I'll refer to, federal firearms license, for the remainder of this presentation as an FFL. FFLs are issued by the U.S. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, more commonly known as the ATF. And as part of that review process, whenever the ATF receives an application for an FFL, they'll often check for conformance with local ordinances as part of their review process. And that check of local ordinances can include local zoning ordinances. And so in the past, the City of Fargo has received inquiries or requests from FFL applicants who are requesting zoning confirmation from the City of Fargo in order to demonstrate to the ATF that their proposed location of their sales is compliant with local zoning code. And in such instances where the location for the sales is a private residence, city staff has denied such requests based on the provision in the Land Development Code that prohibits firearms and ammunition sales as part of a home occupation. Next slide, please. And so FFL applicants have contended in the past that such regulations are in violation of state law, which prohibits cities from placing regulations on the sale of firearms. This concern has been brought up several times, and in the year 2016, the City of Fargo actually processed an appeal of administrative decision. The individual was appealing staff's decision not to allow firearms as part of a firearm sales as part of a home occupation. In that specific case, that was internet sales of firearms. During that 2016 Board of Adjustment case, city attorney did provide a legal opinion on the legality of the city's zoning ordinances, and ultimately that appeal was affirmed. That appeal was upheld by the Board of Adjustment, and the Board of Adjustment did affirm staff's decision. However, questions as to the validity of the LDC's prohibition in relation to North Dakota Century Code has kind of persisted as a topic of contention. And most recently, during the January 27th, 2020 City Commission meeting, this particular issue was raised by commissioners and discussed by commissioners, and ultimately the City Commission decided to direct staff to review the history of this ordinance and to initiate an LDC text amendment to remove this prohibition on firearms and ammunition sales from the LDC for consideration by the Planning Commission and then the City Commission. And then Peter McDonald is the other co-applicant for this. Around the same time, earlier this year, he also submitted, again, that application for LDC text amendment for the same thing, to remove that prohibition of firearms and ammunition sales as a home occupation. And so that's kind of what brings this case in front of you here today. And now I just wanted to provide a little bit of history on that current ordinance, why it's in there today, what staff found. So as you are likely aware, the current Land Development Code was adopted in 1998 after a complete revision and rewrite and readoption of the former zoning code. And after 1998, there was a series of text amendments and modifications as issues were discovered and things were kind of ironed out, if you will. And one such revision took place in 2001, specifically relating to home occupations. And at the time, the specific issue that was of most concern anyway was the amount of conditional use permit applications that the city was receiving and having to process regarding home occupations. With the original adoption of the Land Development Code, any home occupation that had any customers coming to the site required a conditional use permit. And so there were some joint discussions with the Planning Commission and City Commission at that time, and the Planning Commission was tasked with coming up with some revisions to relieve some of that burden of the amount of administrative oversight of the home occupation ordinance. And so ultimately, this resulted in a LDC text amendment which allowed for a certain amount of customers to come to the site of a home occupation without triggering the requirement for a conditional use permit, which is how the LDC is currently written, which I'll talk about in a little bit here. But included in that amendment was the addition of firearms and ammunition sales as an explicitly prohibited use as part of home occupations. At that same time, Adult Entertainment Center was also added to the list of prohibited uses. And in reviewing the minutes and the meeting materials, there's no indication that firearms or ammunition sales was ever discussed in great detail, just based on there being no reference to those that particular item in the materials or the meeting minutes. Fast forward a few years to 2007. Additionally, there was another update to the Land Development Code. This one specifically establishing non-farm commercial use as a allowable conditional use in the agricultural zoning district. Here again, with this ordinance, when this ordinance was enacted, it also included a prohibition of firearm sales as part of this non-farm commercial use in the agricultural zoning district. But here again, there was no indication that firearm sales was specifically discussed in any great detail as part of the amendment process. The main focus of this ordinance was really to establish some flexibility with some development within the city's extraterritorial zoning jurisdiction, allowing some flexibility without having to rezone and replat for purposes of kind of interim commercial use in the cities prior to urbanization of some of these rural areas. Next slide, please. And so that's what we were able to find in terms of the origins of these prohibitions within the Land Development Code. Again, both of them were text amendments after the original adoption of the 1998 Land Development Code. And so I just wanted to touch now on home occupations in general, just because home occupations are a little bit unique in terms of how they're regulated compared to other uses within the Land Development Code. So home occupations are regulated based on a set of performance standards, which simply means that the standards that regulate home occupations are intended to regulate the impact on adjacent properties, as opposed to regulating specific uses or individual use categories, as you might see for other zoning districts or primary uses within those zoning districts. So for example, the uses are dictated based on their impacts to surrounding properties. So for example, the outdoor appearance of the home occupation is regulated. There's a restriction on outdoor activities. Any activity associated with the home occupation must take place indoors. There can't be any perceivable impacts to surrounding properties, so no odor, smells, vibrations, noise, things like that. Deliveries are regulated, as well as the type of vehicles that can be associated with a home occupation, and then also a number of customers, among other things. And so the way that the home occupation ordinance works is that if you have a home occupation, as long as it meets all those performance standards, it would be allowed by right as a minor home occupation. Which leads me to kind of the second point of this slide here, is that there are two different types of home occupations, a minor home occupation and a major home occupation. And the primary difference is that a minor home occupation is permitted by right, meaning, again, as long as your home occupation meets all the standards, you're allowed to do it without any approvals from the city. Major home occupation, on the other hand, does require a conditional use permit in order to operate from a home. And the difference between a major and a minor home occupation, in addition to the requirement for the conditional use permit, is that a major home occupation allows either one non-resident employee associated with that home occupation, or up to 12 customers today, which is an increase in customers per day as opposed to the minor home occupation, which I believe is only 4 customers per day, for example. So that's kind of how home occupations work in a nutshell. Next slide, please. And so as part of the review of this proposed text amendment, staff did reach out to the ATF just for some information and for comment. The city has had contact with the ATF in the past. Again, it's somewhat common, I guess a few times a year we'll get a request from a FFL applicant looking to establish their business and needing to demonstrate zoning conformance. And so the ATF did provide some great information. Included in the packet is one publication from the ATF. They were also able to provide many other publications, which were just too much information for the meeting packet, but anybody interested in learning more, certainly feel free to reach out to staff and we can provide those to you, as well as their website has a wealth of information as well. But in quick summary here, some kind of key notes. An FFL is required for all sales of firearms, even if only dealing in firearms over the internet or at a temporary location such as a gun show, for example. FFL applicants are required to supply photos and fingerprints, undergo an on-site inspection of the business premises, interview with the ATF, complete and acknowledge a federal firearms regulations with the ATF, and undergo a background check through the FBI's National Instant Criminal Background Check System. FFLs can be denied by the ATF for noncompliance with state or local laws, as I mentioned before, although that's not a requirement. Next slide, please. And then FFLs must be renewed with the ATF every 3 years. And then they also did note that there are approximately 7 home-based FFLs currently in Fargo, one of which dates back to 1976. It's likely a lot of these were established prior to the current Land Development Code regulations. And again, it's staff's understanding that the ATF checking in with local zoning jurisdictions might be kind of a newer process or procedure that they do as part of the FFL licensing process. In addition, we did ask if there was any major concerns or some considerations that a local government might want to think about as part of such a text amendment. And the 2 things that their staff did note was gun storage and security is one, and then the manufacturing of ammunition is another maybe topic of discussion. For gun storage and security, they did note that theft from home invasion is one of the ways in which firearms are illegally obtained. They did note that states regulate gun storage differently mainly for retail outlets, and that most states, those gun storage requirements that retailers might be required to abide by don't necessarily apply to home occupations. For manufacturing of ammunition, obviously they wanted to note that the presence of explosive materials, due to the presence of explosive materials, there should be some consideration regarding the fire code or fire code provisions. Next slide, please. In addition, staff did coordinate with planning staff did coordinate with other departments on this. From the police department, from their perspective, they noted that they've had no issues with FFL dealers in the past, and really no concerns with the proposed text amendment due to the backgrounding and the regulation by the federal government of FFL dealers. Additionally, the fire department and building inspections department did both raise concerns regarding the potential for storage of explosive materials associated with ammunition. The fire code does contain provisions for the handling and storage of explosive materials, including limitations on quantities. However, the fire department did want to note that they do not conduct routine inspections of home occupation businesses. It's more common for inspections to take place in a retail setting, where there's less expectation of privacy, things like that. So they wanted to make sure that we note that as well. Additionally, I would note too that we did invite the police chief, fire marshal, and a representative from the ATF to join us on the call today if they're available. I think I saw most of them were on the call as a resource if you have any specific questions for them. And then lastly, hazardous material is prohibited in association with home occupation. Staff did reach out previously to a number of North Dakota cities regarding how they typically handle this type of thing. Heard back from Bismarck, Grand Forks, West Fargo, and Williston. All of those cities do not prohibit firearm sales as a home occupation, so this type of thing is allowed in those specific jurisdictions. In addition, staff has received a few phone calls from the public regarding this matter. One of the callers wanted to note that they were in favor of the proposed text amendment, and then two of the callers did want to note that they were opposed to the proposed text amendment. I think one or two others were just looking for call-in information in case they wanted to provide any testimony as part of this case. As part of the staff's review too, staff would note there was no findings of any infringement on any Second Amendment rights. There is a question again as to the compliance with North Dakota Century Code, specifically section 62.1-0103 of the North Dakota Century Code reads as follows. It's titled Limitation on Authority of Political Subdivisions Regarding Firearms. A political subdivision, including home rule cities or counties, may not enact any ordinance relating to the purchase, sale, ownership, possession, transfer of ownership, registration, or licensure of firearms and ammunition, which is more restrictive than state law. All such existing ordinances are void. So again, this particular provision of the Century Code was brought to, was part of the discussion during that appeal back in 2016 that was heard by the Board of Adjustment. And again, the city attorney did provide a legal opinion that the provisions of the Land Development Code are legally defensible. And then I think lastly, the city staff would want to note that if the proposed amendment were to be approved, firearm sales would still be required to meet all applicable or all home occupation performance standards. So it would be treated just as any other retail sales would be treated as part of a home occupation. They still would be required to meet all those requirements. And then again, manufacturing of ammunition might be a question as far as its relation to the prohibition of hazardous substances as part of a home occupation. Next slide, please. And then in closing here, staff just wanted to note a few things as it relates to the staff recommendation. Again, the staff report is based on direction from the City Commission. So the recommendation is formatted for approval if so desired. However, we certainly recognize that there are multiple opinions on this matter, and so staff would just note that we are available to provide any additional resources or research as needed. Next slide. And so with that, that concludes my presentation. Again, I'd be happy to circle back to any of that detail should you have any questions. And the recommendation is here in front of you. Thank you.
All right. Any questions, commissioners, for Aaron?
This is Dawn Morgan. Just have a question. I don't know that much about guns, but why is it necessary to produce ammunition on the same site that the guns are sold?
I can try and answer that. So there's no necessity, I wouldn't say. It's just another type of business that somebody might want to engage in, manufacturing ammunition for sale. So there's not necessarily, those two things don't have to be done in conjunction with one another.
Wouldn't gunpowder be considered hazardous?
Yep, and so within the staff report, there is a little bit of discussion on that topic. Again, hazardous substances are prohibited in association with a home occupation. And so depending upon which direction the Planning Commission and City Commission might like to go with such a text amendment, that might be a topic that requires some additional discussion to clarify, some of that, where that line is between hazardous substance or not a hazardous substance. There is no definition of hazardous substance within the Land Development Code currently.
I have a couple other things to say. Most of us know that guns are associated with violence and accidents. We hear about them to me, that seems like it would be a detriment to a neighborhood to have to bring that sort of thing into the neighborhood. I certainly wouldn't want to live next door to someone who's guns and producing ammunition. It just doesn't seem like it agrees with many of the things that I've been working for, which is neighborhood preservation and the idea of safe neighborhoods and places where people have a sense of well-being. It just seems like creating environments that are inviting to families with children to move into them, and preservation of the schools based upon the children. To me, it just seems like guns in these houses and ammunition is just a bad idea. And I really, when I was thinking about it earlier today, I couldn't understand why someone who wants to do this wouldn't be put into an industrial area, just as they do with the adult entertainment. So my recommendation here would be to leave the LDC to use zoning regulations of firearms and ammunition sales. Thank you.
All right, any other questions for Aaron?
Aaron, this is Scott. Has the legal opinion of the city changed at all about whether or not it is defensible? I mean, I think you referred to the position that they had back in when it was challenged in 2016, but has it changed at all?
I'll ask City Attorney Eric Johnson to weigh in on that one.
Sure. Hi, Scott. Can you hear me? This is Eric Johnson. Yeah, no, it hasn't changed. I haven't done an exhaustive review of any case law that's come along since 2016, but my understanding is, that the cases that we were cited back then are still valid law in the places they were. At the time, there wasn't any litigation in North Dakota on point. You'll see the cases cited in the packet from my 2016 letter from other states, other areas, even in federal districts. But no, I still think the argument is there and it can be defended. The gist of it being you have a state statute that prohibits regulation of firearm sales and transfers and so forth. And the argument made by some is that, well, this is creation of sales because we can't not allowed to sell out of this. But the case law is just saying those kinds of laws that address, regulating the sale of firearms this is a different type of regulation. This is the zoning regulation is different than sort of regulating the firearm sales itself.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Aaron or Eric?
Aaron, I'm assuming we're going to hear. Go ahead. Are we going to hear from the fire department and the police department too at some point?
We certainly can.
And Mr. Chairman, I have a question maybe for Aaron. Aaron, have you looked at, I know you talked about doing some research on some North Dakota cities around what their regulations were, but have we looked at any other cities that are similar in size to Fargo?
We have not. I think we did reach out a while back when this kind of came up, just as part of that, again, request for zoning conformance process. And the reason we reached out to North Dakota cities is because we're kind of specifically dealing with North Dakota Century Code law as it relates to the specific concerns with the LDC's conformance with North Dakota law.
Thank you.
Why don't we let Fire Chief Dirksen has any comments on this?
Good afternoon, everybody. Chief Dirksen here. Just my biggest concern is the hazardous materials that could potentially be there. Explosives are a hazard, gunpowder and such. So if we're allowing the manufacture of ammunition in a home-based business, that would be of a concern to us. But I'm going to let Fire Marshal Erickson speak a little more on this because he's been independently involved in providing our comments on this, and he's done a lot more research than I have.
Thank you. Ryan.
Okay, thanks, Chief. Commissioners. So Aaron did do a really good job of putting our comments that we provided in the case packet, but just to highlight a couple concerns that we do have is, like was stated, ammunition manufacturer and ammunition manufacturer are regulated in the fire code, and we do regulate those in retail spaces and storage facilities in town. However, in those spaces, we do go out and do regular inspections of them. We don't conduct regular inspections of home-based businesses, and so we wouldn't be in and know how much is stored in there. Like was said in the packet, that also could occur in your neighbor's house today, and would probably have to be complaint-based. Again, the enforcement side of it would be difficult, and our concern is just that depending on the materials you use, some of them do get to be quite hazardous at low quantities, especially things like the black powder, that type of stuff. So, and if there are any direct questions, I'd be open for that. Otherwise, like I said, the comments were pretty accurate in the case packet.
All right, any questions for Ryan?
Ryan, this is Scott again. Question about the inspection. You mentioned that in the retail space, you have rules that talk about security and explosive materials and inspection. But in the packet, the issue that was raised is that, and it's a home-based business, there's an expectation of privacy by the home-based business operator. And we don't conduct, as I understand, inspections of home-based businesses. Is there any, let's say if you did, if you decided to, because I don't think there's a prohibition against it from what I read, if you decided to, how much of the home can you look at if it's a home-based business for an inspection? Can you look at the whole home, or they just say, well, we got my business over here and this 300 square foot area, and that's all I'm going to let you look at, and that really doesn't cover where anything might be at in the home. So how would you go about that?
So that's a good question. I'll probably have to defer some of this to Eric in terms of the legalities of it. But we would, generally speaking, when we go to do an inspection, we would ask for permission to do that. And then typically we would ask for those spaces that they are using to conduct that business. If areas were denied and that we weren't allowed to inspect, and it appears that those were being used for the business, then we would have to follow normal legal procedures to try to obtain either an administrative warrant or something in order to be able to view that. And again, like I said, Eric could probably be better on that than I could.
Sure, I can pipe in, Ryan, Scott. Yeah, if the fire department did sort of expand their regular scope of inspection to include these home-based operations, then piggybacking on what Ryan just said, then clearly that an inspection like that, if a request to inspect was denied, would give rise to a statutory process in North Dakota where you can ask for an administrative search warrant. That's generally granted whenever there's a regular program of inspections, whether it be a building inspection, fire inspection, and including something like this. The other thing, though, I think that gets at your question is exactly what would you be able to expect or inspect? Is it if the firearm sales room is down in the basement, for example, is that all you can inspect? I mean, that becomes sort of an interesting question. And it also gives rise to the possibility of revision to the law. I mean, maybe slightly different than what's exactly before you right now in terms of a proposal, but if there were a change in the law, it's possible that the city could adopt something that at least require someone to have a home occupation to identify sort of where the premises are. And we might have to give a little more thought to what that means, but that would be a possibility.
All right, I think I'd like to take the opportunity now to probably let Chief Todd pipe in on this and say what are his comments.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. Aaron did a nice job of laying out this whole situation. We deal with work with the ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, almost really on a daily basis, and we do a number of investigations with them. The federal firearms licenses they're a very extensive application process, and I do get to see those applications. They're routed through my office, so I do get to put an eyeball on them. The chief of police here. The backgrounds for these federal firearms license is very extensive. Conducted by the ATF, as you heard Aaron talk about. So they don't fool around. They make sure that they're not granting a license to anybody. A lot of their business as FFLs is facilitating the transfer paperwork for sales of firearms between two private parties or across state lines, or through estate situations where somebody has willed firearms down to a son or grandson or daughter, and they facilitate the paperwork for doing that. Then they also facilitate internet sales where if you order a firearm online, it has to be delivered to an they do that transfer paperwork and before you can take ownership of the gun. So there's very, very few FFLs that are manufacturing ammunition in their facilities or their homes. I happen to have a friend that used to have a ammo manufacturing business, and because of the machinery it takes to do that, that would be pretty hard to do in your home if you wanted to do it on a big enough scale where you could make any money doing it. So what you're going to see with ammunition sales through federal firearms license is usually ammunition that's from a manufacturer that they then are acting as the reseller for. That's probably where the vast majority of the ammunition you'll see in sales there. I, as the chief, have never had a complaint on anybody with a firearms license or had any issues with any of them. Like I said, the background on this is fairly extensive, and the ATF runs a pretty tight ship on that. Not here really to take a position one way or the other, but I thought I'd just provide some perspective on it.
Commissioners, any other comments?
Yeah, Commissioners, my name is Joanne Steinington. I'm an industry operations investigator for ATF. And I'm willing to answer any questions anybody has, but one thing I would like to point out is when an individual applies for a federal firearms license, there are 9 separate licenses that they can apply for. And I think the one that most people have been coming to the zoning about is a type 1 license, which is a dealer of firearms. And with that being said, they can't manufacture ammunition underneath that license. They would have to get a type 6 license through ATF to be able to manufacture ammunition. And rarely do we ever see those applications even come through. So that's just one thing to be said about the differences between types of licenses and what we're going with here when it says that they want to line out firearms and ammunition sales. The chief just said it correctly that when they're selling ammunition as a type 1 dealer of firearms, they are selling retail ammunition that's already been.
All right, Commissioner.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
This is Rocky. I think this is a good topic. Obviously, it's been a law in the books for a while, and it's coming to us for a reason. I think we're somewhat focused on this ATF application. And I guess to me, I know a lot of my neighbors have hunting rifles, and there's a lot of guns, in people's homes. And, you get to know those people, and you don't have concerns because they're your neighbors in your neighborhood. And extensive background check, and as Chief Todd said, there's probably not issues with them. I think where I'm stuck at is if I'm outside my house playing with my daughter, there can be 12 strangers walking up to my neighbor's house and walking out with a gun. I don't know those people. I don't know what kind of checks they go through. I probably trust the guy selling them as they're my neighbor, they're at their home, you know where they live. But to have strangers come into a neighborhood and walk out with guns, I guess that's not the type of neighborhood I think is a good idea when there's other options. If that was the only option to have this type of retail business, I understand that, but that's the part I'm struggling with. And I guess I have a question for Aaron. Are we looking at removing any of the other, prohibitive uses? Am I gonna wonder who's going to the strip club next door as well?
The text amendment in front of us today is just specifically to remove the firearms and ammunition sales as home occupation.
So staff is not working on any other issues related to that?
Not currently removing any other prohibited uses for home occupation, nope.
Thanks.
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So could you clarify how many customers, there was 12 a day and then 4 a day there were two different situations. Which one is it? Or all the above?
Yeah, I can answer that one. So within the home occupation provision of the Land Development Code, there are two classifications of home occupation. The minor home occupation, which again is permitted by right with no application or anything through the City of Fargo. That allows up to, I believe, four customers per day and up to 12 customers per week. So that's the maximum number of customers that could come to a home occupation without any sort of conditional use permit. The major home occupation, however, does require a conditional use permit, so it would require approval of the Fargo Planning Commission, and that would allow up to 12 customers per day.
And so could you clarify what we are trying to accomplish? The 12 a day or just the right of being able to do this?
Yeah, so just to clarify a little bit, the request in front of you, the specific LDC text amendment would, so let me back up maybe. So the current ordinance, in addition to all of the performance standards listed for a home occupation, such as number of customers, in addition to that, there is a list of prohibited uses, and maybe Donald, if you could back up to the text amendment slide. Yeah, it's the second slide. There are a list of, I believe, 6 specifically listed uses that are prohibited as a home occupation, no matter what. And so firearms and ammunition sales is one of those specifically prohibited uses that is not allowed under any conditional use permit or anything. It's just not an option to do. And so the specifics of the text amendment would be to remove firearms and ammunition sales from that list of prohibited uses in order to essentially open up the option for somebody to operate sell firearms or ammunition from their home as a minor home occupation by right, or to apply for a conditional use permit to operate such a use through the conditional use permit process if they are looking for, again, more customers per day than is allowed by a minor home occupation.
So they could do the 4 without having to get the conditional use if this were to pass. Without getting the conditional use, they could just go ahead and do the 4.
Yeah, and they would have to, again, have
pretty unlikely that they would that license would include manufacturing. I'm just confused as to why are we lumping the manufacturing and the sales together, because they seem like two very different things. The ATF seems to think they are. Why wouldn't we be taking these? You've got gun sales, you've got ammunition sales, and then you've got ammunition manufacturing. Ammunition manufacturing seems to me to be a very different thing, and it seems to be a very different thing to the ATF as well. If we open this up, it probably would be a moot point because they have to get this extra license. So why don't we separate that off just so it's clear? I certainly don't have any problem with it otherwise. I just don't want to have an explosion and have the fire chief have to run out there.
Yeah, I can just respond from staff's perspective. Thing is, you should be able to see on your screen now the specifics of the text amendment. And so within the list of prohibited uses, that's just the way that it appears in the ordinance as is written today. It's listed as item E under prohibited uses. It's just listed as firearms and ammunition sales, which is described as the sale of firearms and or ammunition, and the production of ammunition for sale or resale are prohibited as a home occupations. So that's simply the way that it appears in the ordinance today, is why we refer to both of them in the staff report anyway.
All right, any further questions before I open this up to the public?
Yeah, John, this is Scott again. The question for the ATF representative we have with us today. Now, the city has said that we've had the police department's had no issues in the past with any of the existing FFLs that were apparently grandfathered in before the original ordinance went into place. But what do they see around the country with these kind of circumstance? Do we have any issues with? Do they have any issues? Do these locations sometimes become targets? Because I'm assuming they've got to be registered and made public where these sales might be occurring. So is that something that we should know about? And are there any statistics on that?
I don't have any statistics available with me at the moment, but they are treated in our eyes as the same as we would treat someone like Shields. They are noted. If you Google and look for FFLs on Google, you're going to come up with a list of them in different cities. I haven't noticed in my time with ATF in hearing from other industry members that they are targeted more so. Our home occupation individuals seem to do a lot of transfers of firearms, meaning if you lived in Minnesota, if you lived in Minnesota and you bought a gun from North Dakota, it would have to get transferred to a federal firearms licensee in Minnesota. You couldn't just carry it over the state line if it's a handgun. So a lot of them are doing transfers of that sort. Most of them do not keep much inventory on hand. They will do special orders for individuals. If somebody wants a particular type of firearm, that FFL then will order that firearm. Once it's received, then the customer will come do the 4473, which is the background check, the paperwork you do to purchase a firearm. And if the background check passes, then that's when they would walk out the door with the firearm. But we haven't noticed any targeting of home occupations versus storefronts.
So you're describing what the typical circumstance, so that would be kind of on the minimal side of things. What would be the more aggressive side of things in terms of activity that might occur?
To be honest with you, most home occupations that I've been to in the past 6 years, I haven't seen most of them have more than, say, 50 firearms. They're in gun safes, or they make closets into gun safes. So their traffic is very minimal in any of the situations. I've never been to a home occupation federal firearms licensee that has constant traffic coming through the door. Those individuals are typically going to your Shields, Cabela's, Fleet Farms.
You mentioned that they're in safes, which is that's good to know, but Is that a requirement of ATF if they are in a circumstance like this, that they have some kind of protective measures to secure the weapons that they might have in their possession?
In a home occupation, we do not have anything that dictates what they have to have for storage of their firearms.
But you have that for retail, other retail circumstances?
And a lot of retail circumstances, like Minnesota has, that at night when there's nobody manning the store, that they have to have some sort of locking system for their handguns. They have to either have a cable going through them or they have to be removed from the storefront and put into a safe. So there's different locations have different standards for their storefronts.
So it would be, you know, and I guess maybe this is a question for the city, for Eric, if we were to consider something like this and we went so far as to say we limit it to sales, just type 1 licenses, FFLs, and then further required that they would have them secured, you know, so that we'd have some confidence in that in their home, and then available for inspection, and let them know fully that that would be a possibility, and that they shouldn't have a presumption of privacy and because it's a home business. Is that something we would be able to do?
Yeah, so, you know, I think what you're saying is a logical line of train of thought. I have to give a little bit of that, given the state statute and how it reads. A very good idea off the top of my head. The state statute says, you know, home rule cities may not enact ordinance relating to ownership, possession, transfer of ownership, and so forth. It's more restrictive than state law. So that's nothing new. That statute isn't anything. I think I get a little bit of concern about is when, you know, the exception that I noted in my opinion in 2016 was that it was this strict zoning law. I want to give a little bit to the question of, okay, if we're going to approve on zoning, but then we have all of these conditions attached, does that start crossing the boundary? That's sort of what I want to think about.
All right, any further questions? Or can I open it up for, I'm going to open it up for public comment. Any of those in favor? Please come up to the microphone, state your name, please.
Yeah, my name is Edward Christosik. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me. I currently live at 5548 47th Avenue South in Fargo. For the past 6 years, I have had an FFL license. And up until this year, I've operated that license out of my home. City ordinance. I can speak through experience. I've not had more than 2 or 3 people a week come to my home to purchase a firearm. Every one of those purchases, with very, very few exceptions, have been totally on a transfer basis. The customer wanted to buy something online. According to federal law, it has to get shipped to an FFL dealer. The customer comes to my location. I can't go to him. I can't drive around in an ice cream truck and sell guns. They have to come to me. We fill out the 4473. Upon approval from the NICS, they can then leave with the firearm. Now, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to refer to you as Rocky because I can't pronounce your last name. To address some of your concerns, not a one of my neighbors has a problem with this. And Chief Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, I do believe that the city requires that any firearm that is in the city limits has to be cased and unloaded unless you have a permit to carry and you're carrying concealed. So everybody that leaves my business would leave with a firearm that was either cased or in its original factory box, and I personally check to make sure that they're unloaded. And any FFL dealer with any common sense, which is, I dare say, most or all of them, would do that. Firearms would not be stored in my house loaded, and I dare say I speak for every FFL dealer out there, they're not going to store firearms loaded. That would be stupid and ridiculous to do. I do not sell ammunition because ammunition is extremely expensive to ship. It has to be shipped UPS ground. UPS ground charges you with a hazardous material shipping fee. I personally don't sell ammunition because of the expense, and I just don't need it. Everything I get is either through internet sales, and I can tell you right now in my home, I have 3 guns that are up for retail sale, which are locked up in a safe. Once again, I will say any FFL dealer with some common sense will lock up his inventory so that there is no risk of it being stolen, because if it is, it's very unlikely you're ever going to get it back or you're ever going to see it again, and you're out that money. So I hope I can quell some of the concerns and the issues that you might have with a local neighborhood FFL. And when I say none of my neighbors have an issue with me doing that up until this year, which I had to move to a commercial zone to maintain my FFL license, they not only don't have a problem with it, they all use my service. I've sold firearm to everybody in my neighborhood with the exception of 2 residents because it's not their thing. They don't hunt, they don't do guns, and that's quite honestly an opinion I respect. But everybody else in my neighborhood has used my services to transfer firearms in online. You'll find very few retailers in town that will provide this service, and oftentimes you can't find what you want in town, and online is a better option for both price and availability. I've sold firearms to private citizens. I've sold firearms to peace officers within the city. I've sold firearms to anybody who wants to, and I have had denials on the 4473 where I was not allowed to let that person leave my premises with that firearm because the ATF denied their application. And I would think that anybody who is a proponent for additional gun control would want more FFLs in the system to legally do transfers. I have also done transfers for people who have taken an estate and received 1 or multiple firearms as part of a will, and they wanted them transferred legally. I have done those. I've done transfers for people who wanted to sell their neighbor a shotgun that they no longer use anymore. I've done transfers for those because the neighbor selling is actually on the hook if the neighbor buying was to use that firearm in an illegal manner. So this way, if we do it legally through the paperwork process, it's the FBI who's approved it. They've done the background check, the individual is good to go, and they can own that firearm. So I'm here, I've got experience. I'm 21 years ex-military. I know all about firearms. I know all about gunpowder, explosives. If you have any questions, I'm willing to answer them. I will say one thing on the manufacturing side of it. Understand the hazardous material issue, but what you need to understand is there are quite literally hundreds of people inside the city limits of Moorhead, Fargo, and West Fargo that reload, case it, and put it in a container and seal it. And it's not any dangerous than the 5-gallon gas can you have in your garage to fill your snowblower. So any questions, I'd be willing to answer them. Otherwise, I'm in support of this ordinance. I would like to get rid of my retail space and lose that overhead so I can just do it from my home.
Any questions from the commissioners? Thank you for your comments. Anybody else wish to address?
Hi, I'm Peter McDonald, I guess co-applicant on this. I had a question for Eric Johnson, if I could.
Go ahead.
So in 2016, Eric made a opinion as the city attorney, but in 1988, Nicholas J. Spaeth, I don't know if that's right or not, I was probably still in diapers then, he made a attorney general's opinion. It's 88-20, and just a small excerpt from that is clearly, a city may not adopt ordinances prohibiting the ownership of firearms, establishing permit procedures, or regulating those areas specifically prohibited by NDCC 6120-01. And just for a refresher there, that includes the purchase, the sale, the ownership, the possession, the transfer of ownership, registration or licensure of firearms and ammunition, which is more restrictive than state law. So I kind of confused on how your opinion supersedes the Attorney General's opinion. And just for a little bit of background there, I also asked Wayne Senjum myself. He refused because I'm a private citizen. He also refused my state representative, Thomas Beadle, to make a new opinion on this matter.
Oh, yeah, I'd be happy to take a look at Attorney General Spaeth's opinion from 1980.
You didn't come through on this end.
Oh, sorry. I said happy to take I know if I've seen that opinion, I haven't seen it lately. I'd be happy to take a look at the Attorney General Spaeth's AG opinion from 1988.
And then I guess my reason for getting the rule change here, or asking for the rule change here, is, really there's nothing to stop right now. If I own them and I want to sell, let's say I own 50 firearms and I want to sell them to increase my collection, I can sell them to anybody in here. There's no paperwork done. It could end up in, the wrong hands. With a federal firearm license, that requires me to do paperwork on the people buying the guns. So, the real purpose of this was to make sure I follow rules, laws, procedures to keep the community safe. It just doesn't make sense why you'd be against having paperwork done on guns. There's a lot of people out there that would appreciate no paperwork, because then the government doesn't know where they went to, they can't find you, anything like that. And to be honest with you, I could have probably lied to you when I first applied. Tomorrow will be the year date of my first denial from the city of Fargo for my FFL. I could have said I just wanted to build guns. And part of the license, one of those 7 or 8 licenses they have, I can get a permit to build guns, which allows me to ship guns to my house, same thing as a number 1 license, which allows me to sell. So, I'm a straightforward person. I wasn't trying to, pull the wool over anybody's eyes. I came at this head on, and I guess I caused a problem. And then, can I ask a question to the ATF also? Are they still here?
Yes.
Article 1, Section 8 prohibits the federal government from usurping powers belonging to the states. These actions started with, you're enforcing local zoning ordinances. They started with no proposed rulemaking printed in the Federal Register, the public comment period that should have took place afterwards, and the final rule published allowing the BTAF to deny the approval of my FFL to the federal government, superseding city-state government.
To be honest with you, I have to refer you to our attorney in St. Paul. If you want to get in touch with me, I can definitely do that. I actually have your information, so I can shoot you off an email or give you a call.
Yeah, Carl couldn't answer that question, so if you would, I'd appreciate it.
Sure thing.
That's all I have, you guys. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Hi, I'm Holden Harwood. I currently do have a home-based FFL for gunsmithing activities in the city of Fargo because that is currently allowed. As a gunsmith, I have probably just as many firearms coming and going from my house as any other FFL doing transfers or sales. Rocky, for your concern about the neighborhood issue, if you look at Shields, Fleet Farm, and Walmart, they all have neighborhoods right across the street, and most of those are high-density housing. And in the state of North Dakota, from the research that I could find, there are approximately 75% of all FFLs in North Dakota are home-based.
Thank you.
Any questions on those points?
Any questions, commissioners? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I think we will close the public comment period.
Commissioner, sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
I did want to note we did have a couple of comments come in via email during the Planning Commission meeting here.
Okay.
So if you don't mind, if you'd like, I can read them
Yep,
to you guys.
that'd be fine.
For the public testimony here. So the first one here is from Deborah Pullen. She says, first, I don't want to take anybody's guns away, and I'm not anti-hunting. I just think we need to make it more convenient for somebody, or I just don't think we need to make it more convenient for somebody to buy weapons. There are enough options already, obviously given the number of gun-related deaths, including suicide in our country. Also, I am concerned that having a weapon stockpile in a home in a neighborhood could be a green light for burglary or accidents. I feel there is no need to change this ordinance, but there could be very negative outcomes if this is allowed. My questions are, who would be regulating these sales? Would this be allowed in any home, apartment, or other dwelling? Any neighborhood, next to a school? How many weapons would they be allowed to have? Is there a limit? Would this include assault weapons? Who would be regulating this and monitoring compliance? Who is going to buy these weapons, and how will they know if the person is legitimate? So I'd like to encourage the Commission to keep this regulation as is. Thank you for this opportunity to express my concerns on this very important matter. Deborah Pullen. And so this one did come in prior to the staff presentation, so I hope that a lot of her questions were answered in that, but certainly we'd be happy to circle back to any of those. And then the second comment, Jerry Hancock would like to vote no, or would like for the Commission to vote on, would like to vote not to change the ordinance and for the ordinance to stay the same. So that was a call-in. We were having some technical difficulties with the phone line, it sounds like, so.
Okay, we do have one more comment.
Thank you for allowing me to do that. To answer the one question on the email about is it allowed in near a school, the ATF has already got guidelines on that. You can't have an FFL business within 1,000 feet of a school, so the answer is no, you can't. And they actually, when they did my license, they actually came out to my home and they looked with a laser rangefinder to verify the distance. And that's the other one thing I forgot to announce when I was up here last time. As an FFL holder, the ATF reserves the right to come in and inspect my business at any time, and they don't have to do it announced. They can just walk in, come knock on the door. Well, they have to knock on the door. They can't walk in. They knock on the door. They say, we're here to do an FFL inspection. Yeah. I have to let them in. I have no option. It's part of the deal. It's part of when you get your FFL license, that is going to happen. And they literally come to my home and they inspect my home, verify that I'm doing everything within federal law. So.
Thank you. All right, anything else, Aaron?
Oh, thank you.
All right, commissioners, I will close the public comment, and any further discussion, or are we ready to act on the motion from staff?
This is Miranda Tass. I have one question on, do we know how many FFL dealers are in Fargo? Do we have an idea?
I could try and start answering that question. So, and Joanne, please feel free to chime in, or Chief Todd, whoever might know the answer to this. But we did hear from a different representative of the ATF a while back who did mention, again, I think it was the 7 FFLs currently located within at a home residence. So that does not include retail sales or anything like that. But again, Chief Todd or Joanne might have additional information there.
This is Don Morgan. It was in that paperwork, the packet that commissioners received. I think it was 7 or 11, one of the two. But that's what was quoted as the number in Fargo currently.
All right, any other questions, anyone? It appears that there's 7. All right. Seeing none, hearing none. Are we ready to act, commissioners?
I'd like to make a motion to leave the LDC as is and continue to use zoning to regulate the land use of firearm and ammunition sales.
So,
This is Melissa Sobolek, and I'll second.
okay, would somebody clarify that motion for everybody? That motion, I need clarification on what Don said myself.
Probably a recommendation to deny.
Is it a recommendation to deny it?
Yes, deny it and leave the LDC as it is and continue to use zoning to regulate the use of firearm and ammunition sales.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to deny. Is there any further discussion, commissioners? Roll call vote.
Scott Stoffren.
Aye.
Mary Sherling.
No.
Melissa Sobolek.
Aye.
Don Morgan.
Aye.
Miranda Tassa.
No.
Rocky Schneider.
Aye.
Brad Bachmeyer.
Aye.
John Gunkelman.
No. Motion carries to deny. All right, moving on to if you don't need a break, we've got one item left on the agenda. Item 16, well, actually we have two items left on the agenda. Item 16, Luxon 25th Street North Addition. Donald.
Thank you, Commissioner Gunkelman. I'd just like to take one moment before we start here to thank our applicants for their cooperation during working through this whole hearing process. As you've noticed, Commissioners, this was an extra long agenda here with originally 17 items. As we did not have an April meeting, all those cases that would have been on here, been on April, were on May, and we appreciate our applicants from April who understood the complexity of the situation, and especially Mr. Thorsness here, who was our last case, who not only waited till April, but till the very end of this agenda to get to his case. So we appreciate everyone's cooperation during this time. Luxon 25th Street North Addition, as Commissioner Gunkelman indicated, this is item 16A and B, and then it's also item E1. So why that is because this area is outside of the city. It's adjacent to the city limits. So item E1 will discuss the annexation. Right now we're going to look at the plat and the zone change. As you see, the subject property is along 25th Street North, just outside the city limits there. That's the gray, shows it's zoned agricultural, so the proposed zone change is to LI, limited industrial, to match the surrounding zoning, which is that sort of brownish tan there. Again, there's the location. It is currently being used for industrial use there. But to properly develop it, the Luxon Investments, the owner wants to develop it more. They have an industrial business that'll fit on there. As you see, most of the properties along 25th Street North are developed with industrial type uses. The area on 27th Street, also zoned industrial, not quite developed yet. As you see, this is from 27th. It's tough to get in. It's swampy on the other side of this. So the foreground here is not part of this property, but you see the type of industrial activity Luxon has there. And again, now we're looking down 25th Street toward the south. As you see Luxon's location there. Part of their plat does include a dedication for the future widening of 25th Street North there. A 40-foot dedication overall that is a section line road, so there'd be 33 feet on there, plus an additional 7 feet. And again, what will happen with the annexation part of this is these run together. The processes are slightly different, but they will meet up together when this goes to the City Commission for final approval here. Again, staff has reviewed the project here, and so the zone change to from agricultural to LI Limited Industrial and the plat of Lux and 25th Street North Addition. Our recommendation is currently for approval, and I believe Mr. Thorsness is still with us and may have some additional comments. This concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
All right, Commissioners, any questions for Donald?
I have a question, Mr. Chair. How does it look for, you said it was swampy?
No.
Drainage,
I just the other side, it was wet, and I didn't want to walk in the mud. No, that was just a personal comment.
Donald didn't want to put his boots on.
Yeah, didn't want to walk in the mud. No, don't take that as a.
Well, it actually is. No, it's a very good lead-in, because I know that area has been wet a lot, and I assume the engineers there, is there any concerns drainage-wise and flood protection-wise that needs to be dealt with?
I think that's airport right-of-way that he's referring to.
It's airport on the other side now.
That's airport right-of-way on the other side, Mary, to the east.
Okay, sure. All right.
Yes, Brenda. You've held on for a long time today, Brenda.
Question. I waited to the very end.
I know. Best for last.
So, Mary, we do have some minimum building elevations that they'll have to build to, but we also have the north side flood protection project that is just, we're just finishing up design, and that should start construction this year. And so that will protect all of those businesses north of 40th Avenue North there. So we do have some building elevations that they'll have to adhere to also.
All right. I appreciate that answer. Thank you.
Yep.
And 40th Avenue, for everybody else that normally calls it, it's County Road 20.
Yes, sir.
I almost said that.
For the layman. So I was confused at first, too. Any other questions for Donald? Seeing none, any questions for the I invite the applicant to speak if needed. Any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, I open the meeting for public comment. Hearing no public comment, and nobody's waving their arms at me. I close the public comment. Any additional discussion, or are we ready to act, commissioners? I'll entertain a motion. Is everybody
Brad Bachmeyer, I'll move to accept the findings.
Thanks, Brad, you saved me. I have a motion. Is there a second?
I will second.
And Mary seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Melissa Sobolik?
Aye.
Don Morgan?
Aye.
Miranda Tassa?
Aye.
Rocky Schneider?
Aye.
Scott Stoffren?
Aye.
Brad Bachmeyer?
Aye.
Mary Sherling?
Yes.
John Gunkelman?
Aye, motion carries. Okay, item E1, Donald.
And then, commissioners, this is really a follow-on to that. Your commission does not actually, this is a non-hearing item, so there's no public hearing to this, although I believe we do take a roll call vote at the end for this. This is the proposed annexation. It's the same place you just saw, slightly different. The area of the annexation plat is slightly less than the area of the overall plat because one of the the south few feet of that lot is actually already in the city because of the way the city limit lines worked out. But this is the annexation. Your commission's part in the annexation process is to find or accept staff's recommendation that the proposed annexation does meet with the 2007 growth plan. This is the 2007 growth plan tier 1, 2007 growth plan tier 1 northeast land use designation that shows this area as is designated for industrial land use, which matches the proposed zoning of limited industrial, and also is within the 20-year boundary of where the city would annex. That's starting in 2007. So by 2027, it would it's reasonable to believe this would be annexed. It does, as is stated in your staff report, follow that it is already on a corridor, already on a major street there, 25th Street North, and extension of utilities along that, as well as the road itself is a reasonable thing to do. And so it is, we find that it is consistent to the growth plan, and our staff's recommendation is just to get your commission's approval of that statement. And then, as noted previously, this is an owner-initiated annexation. Mr. Thorson's company is the only property owner involved in this, so it goes a little different path than a city-initiated one, but then this will meet up with the plat at the city commission in probably about a month or month and a half, and they will be finally decided by the city commission. So that concludes staff's presentation. Thank you, and then Commissioner, I guess you just do a roll call on this one too.
Okay, any questions for Donald on this? Anyone? All right, this is not, there is no applicant other than on this?
Well, Mr. Thorson.
Oh, yes. Any questions for the applicant? Hearing no questions for the applicant. Open for public comment?
No, there's no hearing, sir.
There's no, oh, there is no hearing.
It's a non-hearing
Okay,
item, sir.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
We can go right into any further discussion? And I need a motion on this then, Donald?
I think so, just to be
Okay,
thorough,
we'll have a motion on this, please.
This is Melissa, and I will move to approve.
I have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second, this is Scott.
All right, I have a second. Any further discussion? Nobody's waving their arms at me. Roll call vote, please.
Brad Bachmeyer,
Aye.
Don Morgan,
Aye.
Miranda Tassa,
Miranda?
Aye.
Rocky Schneider,
Aye.
Melissa Sobolik,
Aye.
Mary Sherling,
Yes.
Scott Stoffren,
Yes.
John Gunkelman.
Aye, motion carries. I'd like to thank everybody. I think this went very well, and I'd like to thank the, as I used to call them when I was in school, the audio-visual people here that kept us all in line, and I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
This is Scott, so moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.